Hi guys, good morning from Scotland. I wanted a way to share some of my thoughts with all of you without making you read through everything. So if you're watching this and you're like, I don't really want to have to sit through this, please don't feel obligated. It's just kind of a different medium than writing everything, I guess. A couple things that I have written and read that I wanted to share that have been on my mind. And the first one is from a lunchtime club that we do called 2020 with the secondary students or the high school students. And we're covering big questions in the Christian faith. And the first one of those being, why does God allow bad things to happen? One of the kids wrote that down. And so it's really kind of a classic and really valid question, and so kind of in way of a response, I wrote out a lot of my thoughts on the topic, and I wanted to share some of what I wrote with you. So here it is in my journal. So this just isn't right out of my head. One of the foundational beliefs of the Christian faith is that there's essentially something wrong with the world. And it's hard to talk about this in kind of a detached manner, because for some of us that's really personal. We've had experiences of deep pain and suffering. But it's also something that I think we can just see in the world around us. When we look at things like poverty, atrocities like genocide or war, even at the natural world, when we look at famines or sickness, something inside of us says, it's just not right. Something is essentially not right with the world. It's actually kind of like Matrix. When Morpheus talks to Neo, he says, you can feel it like a splinter in your mind that something isn't right in the world, and no matter where you go, you can't get away from that thought. Christians would say pretty much the same thing. This is actually where the Bible starts. In the book of Genesis, there's a story told about the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, who disobey God in the Garden of Eden. So whether you take that story literally or figuratively, the point of the story is that somehow we chose our own way. At some point, mankind decided to be their own master and to rebel against what God had originally intended for us. And as a result of that broken relationship, we do what we want. We essentially on the inside are no longer connected to that source of goodness, of perfection, if you will. And the world around us also pays the price, as well as the people around us. So just like we can see people go terribly wrong, in small cases as well as in large cases, you think of mass murderers and horrible things like that and wonder, how could this happen? How can people commit these atrocities? And at the same time, though, we look inside ourselves and some of the things we've done in the past and say, how did I get to that point? How was I able to go that far? And that's what the Christian would call the sin nature, that we all have the potential to go that far. We all have the potential to do, those horrible things. And kind of on a secondary level, Christian theology would argue that that fallenness inside of us, when we broke away from God, that also affected the natural world, the physical world, because we were meant to be the stewards or the height of creation. When we fell, everything kind of fell with us. So when we look at sickness, when we look at famine or natural disasters, even the fact that all of life kind of tends towards death, that we all die, Christian theology and Christian belief would say that that's not what was intended, but our fallen state, our rebellion against God, has brought that about. So looking at that situation, or that explanation of our situation, the Christian faith doesn't leave us there. And I think that's the most important thing. The Christian faith isn't about guilt and blame, or it's not supposed to be about guilt and blame. It's supposed to be about redemption and healing. God didn't just leave us in this mess, and He doesn't just judge us for this mess, but He came down into our context in the person of Jesus Christ to share in that suffering and to be with us and to essentially begin the healing process of fixing what has gone wrong inside of us and around us. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize with the kids, and that's what I would emphasize with anyone, is that yes, the situation is like this, and I think we really need to acknowledge that, but it's also about healing. It's also about taking these situations and seeing redemption happen. So that's that. And my second thought comes from this book that we're reading, Velvet Elvis, by Rob Bell. He's kind of a controversial pastor right now, I guess. But I've really enjoyed everything I've read by him. And if I can actually find what I wanted to read, then I won't waste your time anymore. Thanks. Any minute now, I promise. Hey, there we go. Okay. So, as some of you know, I've struggled with my faith, especially last year. It was kind of a difficult year for me. And something I read by Rob Bell really hit the nail on the head as far as I think what I faced goes through, at least in part. And I wanted to read that to you and maybe explain a little bit of what I mean. So what he wrote is, "It hit me while I was watching that for him, faith isn't a trampoline, it's a wall of bricks. Each of the core doctrines for him is like an individual brick that stacks on top of the others. If you pull one out, the whole wall starts to crumble. It appears quite strong and rigid, but if you begin to rethink or discuss even one brick, the whole thing is in danger. Remove one and the whole wall wobbles." Which I think, maybe not in the most literal sense, was true for me, and that I don't think we should look at our faith anymore as building a tower or a wall of perfect doctrines, or one perfect little belief on top of another, but we should look at faith and our relationship with God, kind of like Rob Bell says, as a trampoline. He uses the analogy of springing into the air, to get higher, to experience God more. For me, I would do a Stephen Curtis Chapman thing and think of faith as more of a river, that it's something that we need to immerse ourselves in and let ourselves flow wherever it is that God is taking us. So that's some of my thoughts. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. It's really impressive. And please send me some of your thoughts, some of your responses. I'd love to hear from all of you. And yeah, much love. Okay.